How can we show care to those who have shown care to us? Although Naomi begged Ruth to return to her people, Ruth clung to her mother-in-law and vowed her loyalty until death. Due to famine and the death of their husbands, the world of Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth collapsed around them. Still, they displayed strength of character that is worth emulating. They showed love, faithfulness, selflessness, and concern for each other that should be named among all believers. Instead of a negative mother-in-law report about Naomi, the text portrays her as a godly woman who, in spite of her own suffering and loss, is concerned about the well-being of her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. Life had dealt Naomi a devastating hand. Not only had her husband Elimelech died, but 10 years later her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, passed away as well. Yet Naomi was not so caught up in her own grief that she could not see the needs of her 2 daughters-in-law. And that brings us to our key verse for today, which reads, "But Ruth replied, 'Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God.'" Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. In the ancient world, there was almost nothing worse than being a widow, living without blood-related family to provide or take care of you. This was the lot of Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth. Their husbands were all dead. Who would care for these women in their dire situation? They could be taken advantage of, ignored altogether, or swallowed up in poverty. Therefore, Naomi tells them to return to their birth families so they would have someone to look after them. Because Orpah and Ruth had shown goodness, favor, and mercy toward Naomi and her dead sons, she asked that God show them the same as they returned to their people. In addition, she wanted the Lord to bless them with rest. Hebrew manocha, meaning quietness, a resting place or comfort. The phrase may find in Hebrew is matzah, meaning attain or encounter. Naomi knew that with the loss both she and her daughters-in-law had experienced, all 3 of them needed a place where they could rest, regroup from their sorrows, and receive nurturing and care. She was confident that the 3 of them could find this when they returned home to their own people. Since Naomi had acted so selflessly toward them, Ruth and Orpah returned the kindness by acting selflessly toward her. They followed Naomi's example. Naomi sowed the seeds of love and kindness and reaped love and kindness in return. Since her daughters-in-law would not relinquish their desire to go with her, Naomi reminded them of her own said situation. She feared that she was not able to provide or find provision for them. She was past the normal age to bear children. They could marry as husbands, and if she was able to find refuge among her own people, there was no certainty that her foreign daughters-in-law would be welcomed or be able to marry or remarry. After listening to a long persuasive plea and convincing argument by Naomi for her daughters-in-law to return to their people, Orpah goes back, but Ruth clave unto her. This translates into an absolute committed loyalty, which Ruth expresses in a beautiful poetic form. Ruth's commitment and allegiance to Naomi extends beyond a commitment to one individual and transcends the boundaries of nationality and ethnic religion. Her resolve to follow Naomi to the end is expressed as a matter of both life and death. In many cultures, especially in Africa and the Jewish culture, people may decide to live among another tribe or people, but at death they always want to be buried in their homeland, among their people. But Ruth implicitly declares her allegiance to the Jewish community, culture, and religion. She invokes God's covenant name and seals this declaration with an oath. Here's our lesson. Indeed, the best way to view the story of Ruth is to see it through the lens of God's providential intervention in the affairs of his people, those who would choose him as their God. The story illustrates the act of God in rewarding the faithfulness of those who put their trust in him. No matter how one looks at this story, one thing is certain. God has made his plan of salvation available to all of his creation from the beginning of time, whether Jews or Gentiles. God teaches us to be a beacon of hope and a reflection of God's love by asking the Holy Spirit to present you with opportunities to provide comfort to those who grieve.